Our next panel revolves around the topic of advancing non-grid green energy infrastructures. Moderated by Mr. Victor Singh, Senior Analyst, Renewables and Power Markets of Rystad Energy. Welcome, sir. We also have Mr. Jasper Graf von Hardenberg, the CEO from Daystar Power, and Rubina Singh, former Deep Tech Climate Principal at Octopus Ventures. Please, welcome to our stage, sir. Give us 1 second while we mic these people up. It's important you hear everything they have to say. Welcome. Welcome to our stage. The floor is all yours. Thank you very much. Advancing non-grid green energy infrastructures. To you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Hope all of you are enjoying the start of the conference. I'm very happy to moderate the next panel that we're going to be discussing today. I will quickly introduce myself. So I'm Victor Singh. I'm part of Rystad Energy. For who doesn't know us, we are a global market intelligence company, founded in Norway and operating all over the world. And we are basically tracking all the energy markets. And myself, I'm focusing on the renewables and power markets, basically providing insights about all the existing projects in the world for renewable energy. And today I'm very happy to be discussing two quite key topics. The first one is the non-grid green energy infrastructure. And the second one, which is quite related, is how to integrate going forward those infrastructures to the grid. And I have two experts today to discuss that topic, and I will let them introduce themselves and maybe mention to what extent you are experts in that topic.
Okay, great. Maybe to kick it off, so my name is Jasper. I'm the CEO of a company called Daystar Power. We describe ourselves as an off-grid utility. And what that means is that in many emerging markets in which we operate in, the grid actually is unable to provide the required electricity for factories, businesses, etc. And so we provide that on an off-grid basis through a combination of renewable energy, storage, diesel, gas, whatever really is available makes sense and is cost effective.
Hi everyone, I'm Rubina Singh. So, I'm an early stage VC investor, primarily focusing on deep tech and climate tech, with a focus on energy as well as part of the investments. Most recently as principal at Octopus Ventures, moving to a new fund in a few weeks. But before that, my background's in energy, starting my career as a solar and battery engineer, and then spending quite a few years at Centrica in development, scaling up and launching of new energy solutions, and then corporate venturing as well as innovation. So for me, quite interested in seeing a lot of the new innovation that's coming across alternative energy solutions, and with more decentralization, decarbonization, seeing a lot more in off-grid energy as well. So very excited to be here and discuss more with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, both. So we're going to dive straight into the topic. So what we mean by non-grid clean energy infrastructure can be quite broad. It can go from simple PV panels installed off the roof of residential houses, let's say. But it can be also quite more complex with entire off-grid systems, mixing up PV panels with storage. And we can go even larger with what we call microgrids that could be autonomous islands having their own energy system non-connected to a wider grid. And generally, the idea is to get some sort of autonomy and also resilience in the way to operate the supply of power. But maybe, Jasper, do you have some sort of examples, some sort of what are the typical use cases, I would say, the typical opportunities to develop such installations?
Yeah, so if you look at certain emerging markets, for instance, Nigeria and recently also South Africa, you're in a situation where the grid is not reliable anymore. The grid is failing or has been failing for a long time. And if you're a factory operating in these countries, you can't rely on it. So your main focus starts becoming, okay, how do I get reliable power? That's your number one priority. How do I get reliable power? Now, the traditional way to do that was installing diesel generators, right? So, and if grids went down, you just ran on diesel, which is incredibly expensive, it's incredibly polluting, and really not the way to go in this modern age anymore. So companies across emerging markets are looking at ways and saying, okay, how can we, on the one hand, retain reliability by having our own off-grid power plant, really, but at the same time, keep costs low or reduce costs and decarbonize as well, right? Because if you're Nestle operating in an emerging market, you still have the same decarbonization goals from your Swiss headquarters as anywhere else in the world. It's just multi times harder to do this. So what would be examples? So examples are, for instance, we work now with one of the largest beverage manufacturers in the world in Nigeria to move them from operating completely on diesel generators, what they're doing now, to a more renewable mix by installing solar panels on the roof, by exploring thermal batteries, for instance, which we had a discussion about earlier today, and putting in place storage systems to really ensure that electricity can be used at the right times of the day. So it's really about looking at the problem and the use of energy in a holistic manner, and then figuring out what are the different kinds of technologies and solutions we can bring in to cut costs, improve reliability, and at the same time decarbonize.
Right. So we could say that Daystar Power is mostly focusing on the African market in a way, and
Yes.
and so that's typically this case of non-grid or off-grid infrastructure is kind of driven by the constraint of having an reliable grid, and also the constraint to bring power to the people who need that. So my next question will be, how do you build a viable business case to make that work?
So yes, number one, you're right? You work with a grid constraint, but as we've heard earlier this morning, right, there are constraints in the grids even in Europe, and as we add more off-grid infrastructure, solar panels, there's more constraints coming in. Now, the business case is actually not that hard, because if you think of Africa, you think of, okay, poverty and so on, but actually what you do see if you're there is, A, there is a lot of industry there, B, they pay much more for electricity than you do in Europe, right? So I think in Senegal, for instance, where we operate, it's $0.25 a kilowatt hour for a factory. So that's very, very high. And these high power costs actually make it quite viable to bring in infrastructure and solutions which are not competitive in Europe or the US because they're just too expensive.
I see. So there is definitely a business case, and I guess where you can mostly help is to bring maybe the initial capital to kick that off, or?
Yeah, I think the capital is not the constraint. I think one of the major constraints is actually that equipment manufacturers, they say, okay, when we have a new solution, let's focus on the US or on Europe, because that's where the big market is. But actually, the commercial viability often is much more there in emerging markets where power costs are much higher. Yeah. And also regulation is much easier. So to a certain extent, these markets, some of them, not all of them, and there's always differences, are like a sandbox, a playground to try new things and reach commercial viability.
That makes sense. Rubina, how about you? What markets would you say you've been focusing on in the past? What is the main sort of scope that you have?
So from my point of view, I think there are 4 use cases where we're seeing increasing innovation and technologies for off-grid. So one is just the need for more energy independence and cost efficiency. With volatile energy prices, you are seeing that customers, consumers can bring their own solar batteries and then generate their own energy, become more self-sufficient while also helping manage the energy cost prices. The second one is then again across the access and availability of power. So with the increased proliferation of distributed energy assets with the uptake of electric vehicles, with the uptake of heat pumps, and many more coming, there might not be enough interconnections to the grid, or there might be areas, remote areas, where there just isn't access to power, just as Jasper was saying. So having off-grid solutions, whether solar, batteries, hydrogen, ammonia, we see quite a bit of innovation there as well, can help provide that off-grid energy and access in areas where it's not as easy or no longer needed to have that grid connection. And then the third area, again, to Jasper's point, is around the need for resilience. So even in the UK, even across the world, with extreme weather, we are seeing power outages with different energy assets being integrated onto the grid. Again, there is that instability in power quality. So that can have a significant impact, especially on critical infrastructure. A few minutes of downtime can impact and lead to millions in losses when it comes to commercial and industrial players, to hospitals, to healthcare system. So there is a real need there for uninterrupted power supply and backup power, where traditionally it's been CHP, diesel gensets, but then what we're seeing is now new innovation in terms of alternate fuels, in terms of green hydrogen, ammonia, batteries, of course, being used to then help decarbonize it. And that brings me to the fourth point, the need for decarbonization in general. As a country, as a planet, as we move towards a net zero solution, more decarbonization is needed across different sectors. And in some areas, solar, wind, it can be the solution. In some cases, it's batteries. But in areas, and there are certain hard-to-abate sectors, as it's calling them, in steel, cement production, where the relatively traditional renewable solutions aren't fit for purpose. So we do need alternative solutions. And then again, coming back to diesel generators, which do supply a lot of market around construction, across mining, across off-grid power, even to EV charging, we do need to decarbonize that as well. So with that, we're seeing increased innovation in green hydrogen, in modular green hydrogen, which can help in modular green ammonia and batteries. So those are the four areas, I think, in terms of use cases and markets, and then also the relevant technologies that I'm seeing quite a bit of technologies coming in.
That's a very complete answer. And maybe what I would like to ask next is, besides those four main sort of opportunities, have you seen any sort of innovation, any growing opportunities recently to answer the growing need for off-grid installations, like any breakthrough technologies or even business models? What's the most recent thing you've seen in the market?
Well, so quite a bit, actually, because one of the things is we're talking about the hydrogen economy, is hydrogen as the new alternative fuel, green hydrogen, which can really come and help decarbonize hard-to-abate sectors. It can help with decarbonization of transportation, especially heavy-duty transportation with shipping, and ammonia, again, a form of hydrogen, with batteries as well. So what I'm seeing is, so the grid, the central grid, it's been around for centuries, right? Just because something was done a particular way doesn't mean we have to continue doing it. With so many different distributed energy assets, sometimes it makes sense for them to eventually be integrated into the grid, but sometimes it might make sense, it might be more optimal for it to work in smart grids and off-grids settings. So the different settings, and then increasing digitalization, and then AI as well as playing a role. Excuse me. I think we have a chance to really see what is the most optimum system and design it that way, but also to see how we can monetize this in different ways in terms of providing flexibility, demand response services back to the grid, but also within small mini virtual power plants, as off-grid, smart grid areas as well. So I'm seeing quite a bit of innovation across the board in the UK and in different countries as well in those areas.
Yeah, that's great. And I guess even if it's a growing market, even if we start to see innovations such as hydrogen even impacting the off-grid infrastructures, I guess there are still several challenges to overcome through innovation or through some sort of regulations. I'm thinking to technical challenges. I'm thinking also maybe to regulatory challenges that even the grid infrastructures are facing. So to your opinion, Jasper, what are the main challenges now, at least for your market?
Yeah, I think there's many challenges, of course, right? So, and I mean, I just want to latch onto a point that was made in an earlier panel, that customers, so industries and so on, are not moving fast enough, right? And in some ways that's very true. In other ways, however, many of these companies that try to decarbonize are quite lost, because these solutions we're discussing, they're complicated, right? They're not easy. Even for me, who has been in energy now for a long time, sometimes it's hard to understand exactly how it all fits together. And when I talk to these customers of ours, they're quite lost. They really need help. And when they talk to different startups or providers of new solutions, it's always in one area. It's always a segment. They then themselves have to start putting the pieces together, and they're not equipped for it. They produce beer or fizzy drinks or chips or whatever. It's not their job to put all these pieces together. It's not what they're trained for. So I think there's first something we have to do as energy tech providers to be more solution-oriented and to really help customers. So I think that's one. Regulation is definitely an issue, right? So regulators tend to be always behind a bit the curve and try to catch up instead of being forward-thinking. But I think it's gotten a lot better. Then the last one, I mean, I think that some of the hardware that's out there is, also has to still do a lot better. It's often produced and developed for ideal situations which often don't exist. Then when you use it, you start getting problems with it. And then suddenly you have providers trying to fix it on the fly and it's not working properly. And even with major manufacturers, we had huge issues. So I think lots of challenges. I think we all have to do better as a community, offer better and easier products for customers, work with regulators, and just get better systems out there.
So on the last point, the technical aspect of, I guess, problems of, I would say, standardization of product across the different markets. How does Daystar Power deal with that? Do you have sort of internal work being done to solve that, or is it more through external providers? Do you interact directly with the industry? What's the secret sauce?
I mean, there's no secret sauce. We work with lots of external companies, with startups, with established companies, both on hardware and software, to try to fix the issues we're seeing. And what we've figured out over time, these are hard issues apparently, because everybody's struggling at just fixing data integrity, for instance, on the production of power seems to have been a big issue. It took us a long time to fix. We've worked with battery suppliers on getting batteries that can actually switch between an off-grid and an on-grid mode. Seems to be a big issue. It took them a long time to solve this. So it's really working hand in hand with manufacturers, both OEMs, trying lots of different products and seeing what works. So a lot of experimentation. And what the challenge is from that, of course, is to build a profitable business at the end of the day, and a scale, a big business. At some point, you need to standardize. You need to industrialize what you're doing, and that's hard if you're trying to mix and match and figure out what's working.
Very interesting. And so we've mentioned commercialization, challenges, regulatory, technical. Rubina, is there anything else you'd like to add to the table?
Right, so agree with all of that. So the two other things I would add is, I think, two other challenges is, one is around basically understanding what the markets are, right? So there's a lot of uncertainty when it comes to a lot of the early stage solutions, what we're calling first of its kind solutions, in terms of which one is the one that'll end up dominating. And I remember less than a decade ago, we were having a similar conversation whether it'll be solar or wind. Now it seems almost obvious and almost obsolete as to why we were even having that conversation, because it's solar and wind, they're complementary, they're different use cases. So similarly, often we're even now having the conversation whether it's electric vehicles or hydrogen-enabled vehicles. I think there's a role for different technologies to play. But just understanding how the different technologies will work together, what role they'll play. We need a coordinated approach across startups and technology providers, across industry, with regulators and investors working together. It's easier said than done, but I think a lot of coordination is needed there to have that joint approach. So that's the one challenge and opportunity. And then the other one I would add is also in terms of who finances them and what does that look like. Because again, with first of kind investments and a lot of these technologies, often they can be CapEx and asset heavy. And then different models just work better at different stages. Would it be crowdfunding at earlier stages with VC money coming, or a bit of a blended finance mechanism with debt and equity? What does that look like, and how does that change across the different stages? I think that's something that'd be very helpful for investors, for startups, for the industry to realize as well.
No, That's anything to add on this one, Jasper, on the financial side?
No, the financing, as Daystar Power went through different stages of funding its growth, I think at the very beginning, crowdfunding, as you mentioned, was hugely important for us. It's sounds strange, you crowdfund your company, but for, I think, the first 2 years, definitely, it was a major source of financing and worked really, really well in hindsight. So I think just want to add that it's actually quite relevant. It's not obscure at all.
Yeah, no, I fully agree, and I think we've been quite broadly through the different challenges and even what could help to solve those. And maybe we can switch to the next part of the panel, which is an interesting one, because those projects, most of the time, they've been developed so to override the fact that the grid takes some time to reach certain area, and that those areas, they need reliable power, and that's why they've reached the point of developing off-grid installations. But now what we see in Europe, but also in other markets like Africa, we see that the grid is finally coming to those areas, and now they want to bring in the market, in the grid, all those installations. And they already see benefits to it, mostly for Europe, that there is definitely a use case to help on the load balancing, that they want those installations to react to price signals and not just to their own demand patterns. So the grid wants, I would say, they want you to come in, but my question would be from the developers or the companies that have developed those installations. What is the use case? What's the incentive to move to the grid now after years of operations or whatever?
So, first to say, there are markets out there where there's a question mark where they will ever have a proper national grid. But let's put that aside. So I think working with a grid has a lot of advantages, of course. The disadvantage of having an off-grid installation is you have one captive user, which has a fluctuating load profile. And if you want to serve them, you have to oversize your storage or your alternative sources like a backup diesel generator, right? Now, if you have some kind of grid, you can start spreading the power between different users, and that then evens out these load fluctuations, and then you can optimize a bit on the infrastructure you're putting in place. So that's the incentive, right? So it reduces the investment per consumer at the end of the day. And now there is an incredible openness now that we see in markets. We operate in 7 different markets in Africa, of regulators to start saying now, okay, let's try this out. Let's try methods of using the grid together with your off-grid solutions to provide a power value proposition to customers that is actually cheaper and more reliable than what is there right now. And that's different from a few years ago when there was a lot of pushback from utilities because they saw renewable energy as a competitor off-grid renewables, right? Because we come in, we're cheaper, and we take away best customers. So now there's this evolving interest to do this, and there's lots of different use cases and potential methods coming up with tripartite offtake agreements with factories and other methods. So it's really a phase of experimentation, I would say.
It's still a phase of experimentation.
Yeah, now we're getting into the phase of experimentation of interlinking the grid with off-grid sources.
And how is it going for now, would you say?
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, I think if I look at the interest of storage, I think, orders for storage solutions have, increased 5 times already compared to last year. Companies now really want to move, it's starting to really take off, I think, yeah.
That's great to hear. How about you, Rubina? Have you seen any opportunities, any sort of best case to move to the grid?
Right. So firstly, I don't think everything will or needs to be connected to the grid. I think what we are seeing, what we have proven is that decentralization works and will work. When we have distributed energy assets, there is a clear case for energy independence and a bit of being de-risked from global supply chains, from geopolitical issues, which decentralization does bring, and having, and I think the net zero system of the future would be a mix. Of course, the grid isn't going anywhere, it shouldn't, but then there would be pockets where off-grid, smart grid systems just work. Having said that, in areas, in cases where grid connection, of course, does really help, because then again, there are opportunities around better optimization and monetization, again, when it comes to flexibility, demand-side response markets, which exist, but to a large extent, there are lots of constraints. But there are a couple of issues around there as well. So for example, even for EV chargers to be connected to the grid, at least in the UK, for example, sometimes it can take months, years, or millions to get one interconnection. So there are issues around that need to be navigated. And then again, with the different distributed energy assets, it's a huge opportunity. It's incredible that we're doing that. But I think the other thing we need to think about is the volatility in the power quality, the frequency and voltage regulation. So there's a lot that we need to then consider on the power electronics of what this actually means in terms of that optimized grid integration. And there's innovation happening there, which I'm excited about, because we just haven't seen innovation in the grid in a century, maybe. So those are areas, and I do think there are opportunities, but again, I think the future will be a blend of distributed energy assets, which won't be connected to the grid, and those that could be connected to the grid.
Absolutely. So also maybe now, if you're developing today an off-grid installation, you can indeed plan to stay out of the grid, and that could be decentralized and fully working. But let's say you still want to keep in mind the option of getting in later on. Like what do you think are the sort of prerequisites or anything like that could avoid you issues in the future? Like anything that you should think about in the early stage to avoid barriers going forward to move to the grid?
So I think one would be, again, the interconnection in terms of the power electronics, how that would actually work. And then also, I think the digitalization of it, so understanding both the flow of data and electrons, how that will work, so really having that information, because even right now with the grid, we just do not have that much information in terms of where assets can be connected, what impact that would have. We are seeing more innovation, more startups providing services there in terms of doing the operation inspection and understanding the failure modes. So I think building that into it, so being aware and being able to play with the different power systems with the different assets could also then help potentially integrate it into faster and better.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And how about the financing side? Is it any sort of requirements maybe to take into account, or is it fine to just build a new financing case like further on and just to keep the asset going at the beginning?
So I think that would be more of a question for the utilities and the government potentially, at least from my point of view.
Anything on it, Jasper? Or?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, if there's a valid business model where you make money, you'll get it financed, yeah. Right? So, and the different financiers have different priorities, which sometimes are very difficult to manage around. So there's a lot of shopping around you have to do, I think, based on what your business case is and how you've proven it. But ultimately, I think if there's a if you have product market fit, as the previous panel said, I think you'll get it financed. Yeah,
that fully makes sense, I guess. I think we have 2 minutes left. I don't know if there is any sort of setup ready, but is it any questions from the audience that we could take, or should we just reach the conclusion of the panel? It looks like there are no questions, so maybe I will just ask you both to maybe bring any final words that you'd like to mention about the topic or about anything else to conclude this session.
Rubina?
For me, I think it's a really, really exciting time where we have an opportunity to basically literally redesign the energy system of the future, begin new decarbonized solutions. And I think one of the ways that could help to do it is not just try to force fit new technologies into the existing system, but maybe potentially even start from a blank piece of paper and see what could this look like, what are the opportunities there, and keep that in mind when we develop new technologies, when we invest in new technologies, and when we integrate them in.
Yeah, from my point of view, I completely echo what you said. I think that's exactly right. Let's really sometimes start from first principles, think what actually makes sense. I also think we just need to move a lot faster, right? So, I mean, call for action has been a theme that's been mentioned a few times. I think everybody has to move a bit faster, be it on the customers, on the equipment manufacturers, on solution providers like us. We all need to speed it up, right? The climate crisis is not waiting, so we all have a lot of work to do. But as you said, it's such an exciting time. I think it's a privilege to be part of it.
Fully agree on the speeding up question, and I think that this topic is definitely sort of an answer. I think the off-grid installations are kind of the example of developers who want to go faster than what the wider infrastructure is going. So thank you for an exciting session, and thank you everyone for listening, and wish you a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.